After being cooped up for COVID safety purposes, it seems everyone is chomping at the bit to go see the world and to connect with some distant friends, maybe family. I'm here this Sunday between a trip visiting family in Oklahoma last week and heading off to the Sierra Nevada mountains next week. People travel for all sorts of different reasons, some to see family, some to experience a little bit of relaxation and maybe even luxury. And we go to learn firsthand about different places and different times. This Sunday, we're talking about a completely different type of travel, though. Pilgrimage. And there are some similarities, but it's a category all its own. One of the most striking things to me about pilgrimage is how ubiquitous it is. Just about every religious tradition I know of has some form of pilgrimage. And there's a great deal of difference among religious traditions. I'm not a fan of sweeping them into one big pile and saying they're all the same. That diversity is part of the beauty of our human experience. But amid those wonderful differences of religious expression, pilgrimage shows up again and again as a practice. At its simplest definition, pilgrimage is a journey to a very different place where someone searches for insight about God or about themselves. It's seeking personal transformation through a sometimes arduous journey. So I wanted to share with you a little bit some of those samples of religious pilgrimage. In Christianity, I found that the earliest pilgrimages related to the life, the death, and the birth of Jesus. Those date back to the 4th century. I guess Christianity had spread so far so quickly, it took an arduous journey to get back to where it started. Later pilgrimages focused on Rome and famous cathedrals, still others focused on relics. A lot of different pilgrimages focus on relics. These are either the remains of saints or an object that was touched or used by a saint. It's fascinating to me that people of faith travel tremendous distances to be by an object that a saint touched hundreds of years ago. Within Hinduism, most of the religious pilgrimage sites are associated with the location that a god or goddess had some significant activity. This year, one pilgrimage in particular was all over the international news. The Kumbh Mela is a huge pilgrimage that happens about every 12 years. That cycle depends somewhat on the revolution of the planet Jupiter. It's located at the confluence of the river Ganges and a couple of other major rivers. It's marked by a dip into the river. It includes numerous fairs and religious discourse and entertainment and feeding for those who need some food. The scale of the gathering almost defies description. It's the largest gathering of human beings in the world. On a single day peak attendance, they estimate 30 to 50 million people. Yes, 3 to 5 times the population of the county of Los Angeles. Unfortunately, a quirk of the astrological calendar dictated that it would happen in 2021, a year earlier than normal. So that exact impact is hard to measure, but experts are thinking that that was probably one of the biggest spreaders of COVID this year that we could trace. I also wanted to mention that there are documentary films about the Kumbh Mela, both the one in 2004 and 2016. They offer a fascinating look at humanity and religion. The next one, when the word pilgrimage comes up, the thing that pops into most of our minds is the Hajj. This Muslim pilgrimage is so significant that it's become kind of a figure of speech in American culture. As we refer to someone making an important trip, we talk about them going to their Mecca. Hajj is one of the 5 pillars of Islam, as you may know. It's a mandatory duty for observant Muslims to take once in their lifetime. There are some important caveats, though. That's only for those who are physically able and for those who are financially able. You can't leave your financially dependent family at home. That's not the idea. It sounds like an absolutely life-changing journey. Other versions of pilgrimage occur in Judaism and Buddhism, Taoism, Sikhism, and Zoroastrianism, and others. Obviously, we don't have time to even touch on those. Instead, I wanted to talk some about the defining characteristics that they share. The most obvious piece is the destination. A couple of things likely happen there. One is a sense of place that connects us to a past. I was thinking more of an ancient past, but Michelle told us about not so ancient pasts in the homes of presidents and a sense of connecting to the history. There's something about being in a physical space that transcends time in a way that a book just can't carry you there. The other thing that happens, ideally, is a sense of awe and wonder at these sites. I think it's important as we recognize people making these pilgrimages in search and awe and wonder that that's the first source of our tradition that we name in our list of 6 sources. The very first source of our tradition is direct experience of that transcending mystery and wonder. Our seeking is not so different. We all hunger for a little awe and wonder in our life. In fact, we're so hungry for it that we'll go through some pretty harrowing journeys to get in just the right space to find it. The destination is important, but the destination definitely isn't everything. One of the most overlooked pieces of pilgrimage is community. Especially in these big religious pilgrimages, the community is kind of everything. People from dramatically different backgrounds, different countries, leave behind their individual day-to-day lives and join together in a shared focus on the sacred. You may remember Denzel Washington as the lead actor in the 1992 movie Malcolm X. Amazing film. Of course, Malcolm X is known mostly in American history for his powerful and eloquent repudiation of white supremacy and his explicit bias for his own African American community. This was all packaged in the Nation of Islam. But the movie Malcolm X covers all the major events of his life, including his journey to Mecca for the Hajj. The movie is particularly powerful in this because you see the racial and cultural diversity surrounding Malcolm in this moment. In these powerful scenes, he's clothed in the white robe of pilgrimage. This garment is explicitly used to mark the equality of all Muslim pilgrims in the eyes of Allah. And in his pilgrimage experience, and particularly the community gathered there, Malcolm dramatically changed his worldview. He let go of his view of racial hierarchy and replaced it with a view of radical equality. It's an amazing film worth rewatching. As I did a little more research, I found that community doesn't just come from being nice to each other, though. It also comes from having a common enemy. I found that some Christian and Hindu pilgrimage sites offer a vivid experience of a shared enemy. These specially trained practitioners will perform exorcisms of demons and evil spirits, because nothing brings a group together quite like having a common enemy. And I know that may seem like a distant experience for Unitarian Universalists, but I ran across another description that might be more at home. Religious scholar Victor Turner suggests that pilgrimage has changed dramatically since the Industrial Revolution. He says in the modern world, it's less about spiritual obligation and more of a leisure activity. Because of that shift, pilgrimage has become really a social critique. So the shared enemy of pilgrims today may be less about the devil than it is about the evils of monotonous modern life. We're all getting away from something. By undertaking pilgrimage together, a whole community, at least for a while, rejects the trappings of modern life and the oppressive daily grind. The other core aspect of pilgrimage was this sense of ritual. Every pilgrimage I know about involves some sense of purification and some leap of faith. I know those sound like very religious terms, but they aren't necessarily. Of course, there are religious acts of purification. Bathing in the Ganges is a huge one of those acts of purification. And Christian penitents endure various pieces of voluntary suffering to purify themselves of their sins. But the journey itself, I think, contains an aspect of purification in it. To go somewhere special, by definition, you have to leave the rest of our lives behind. For many, that means leaving behind a job for a while, or perhaps temporarily leaving some of the parental duties and responsibilities. Purification of travel means leaving behind the material comforts of home. Lord knows we could all use some purification from the mountains of unnecessary belongings we accumulate. If that's not enough, what about stepping away from our social support system for a while? Family, friends, faith community, all remain back home while the pilgrim ventures out to seek meaning in the world. Even without the rituals of purification, when we step out into the world, leaving the mundane behind, we get a new, fresh start in a way. This past Thursday night at our board meeting, we had some getting to know you icebreaker questions because it's a new church year and we had a couple of new board members. We asked a few questions that dig a little bit beneath the surface. The one that I thought was really fun is, if your hometown had to be described in a food, what would that food be? As I was writing this week, I realized a question about pilgrimage might also serve a similar purpose. Since we Unitarian Universalists don't have a prescribed spot to travel, and because our sources of inspiration are varied, it's likely that we would choose pretty different destinations. Based on what we know about pilgrimage, in order to really separate ourselves from the day-to-day life and to reconnect with the sacred and our deepest values, where would you go and why? There are so many options. For a lot of us, nature sites are the place to go. I don't know if it's quite a pilgrimage, but that's what I'm doing next week as I head into the mountains backpacking. Some people take pilgrimages to trace their genealogy and cultural heritage, going to explore your Scottish roots in Scotland, perhaps. Or maybe you're invested in justice building and democracy. Perhaps Washington, D.C. is the spot to go, or a civil rights tour of the South. Art lovers might be drawn to the Louvre or the Hermitage. If you want to deepen your connection to Unitarian Universalism, there's no better place to visit than Boston and the surrounding area. So if you could go anywhere, seeking inspiration, where would you go? Of course, we're not all heading out for major pilgrimages. Still, there are aspects that we can incorporate in our regular travels. The location is important, but even more important are the relationships with people along the way. I know several of you have traveled together. If you're traveling with people you already know, it's likely that the changed circumstances will open up new ways of being together. And that's a beautiful opportunity to develop a relationship. And who knows who you might meet along the way. Mountains and art are beautiful, but people, living, breathing human beings, they're absolutely amazing. So spend some time focused on the people too. I also suggest leaving behind what you don't actually need. Traveling is an experience of both going somewhere and leaving home behind. So leave it. Leave the stuff. You would be shocked at how little you need to get by for a week or so. So finally, I recommend leaning into the unknown. The best moments in travel are rarely the ones that we plan. So don't get hung up on a trip being exactly the way you envisioned it. That detour that you're making may be the next great unexpected adventure of your life. Amen.